wait, we should probably stop right up here because we're trying to see how long it takes to go across the alley all the way to
You timing yourselves?
Yeah, we are.
Awesome. Neighborhood kids. Some of Sam's friends. Day 3. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony, and it is September, which means it is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, every day this month, I'm walking 3/4 of a mile. That's the distance from the Ronald McDonald House in New York City to the front door of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and back. And that is a distance that my son and I would travel every day that we were up there. My wife and I lost our son, Sam, on January 23rd of 2020 to neuroblastoma after a 4-year fight. If you haven't heard all that story, we did that yesterday. It was a downer, but that's to be expected, I think. So today what I want to do, in order to make you guys feel better, is I'm only going to tell funny Sam stories. And see if I can lighten the mood a little bit. Because, you know, it's hard for people to imagine that there are still funny stories. But the truth is, life in the middle of the fight with cancer is still life. And life is full of dark and light, heavy and light. So we certainly had our share of fun in between times. So one of the things, a couple notes. Some of you have asked, how can we make donations and things like that? There is a link to our page for Alex's Lemonade Stand at the top of the description for this every single day. If you can't find it, just Google Alex's Lemonade Stand. They have a donate button. You don't have to do it through our page. It's fine. And it was pointed out, thanks to my dad, you know, it doesn't have to be anything big, guys. And if you can't do a donation right now, that's okay. Next time you're out and you see a little bald kid running around, doesn't have to be September, buy him dinner. Pick up their tab if you're at a restaurant or something. We were, one of my favorites, we were down at a hotel here in Dallas while Maud's parents were in town, and we're just walking. And I think there's a big football game in town. That was when lots of people could be in one place at one time because the hotel was packed. And this guy came up to us, which happened pretty often when Sam didn't have hair. And he pulled out of his pocket a sticker. And he was a firefighter. And he just carried these stickers. And they were little firefighter badges. And every time he ran into a kid who looked like they were going through something, he gave them a sticker and told them how brave they were. And that made Sam's day. We actually ended up putting that sticker on a teddy bear that someone else had given him, and so the sticker is still around somewhere. It's not something that just got thrown on a shirt and then lost, you know. But it really brightened his day. So any little thing you can do to help these families and these kids is great. Okay, lighter, like I said, lighter side stories. One of the things that I left out of the story yesterday, I knew I had left out a bunch of stuff, and I was corrected by lots of people, so thank you. It was a lot. I completely skipped over all of the radiation. Radiation for us was every morning for 4 weeks in a row. And we went through this twice, about a year apart. Every morning, Sam and I would get up at about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we would drive out to the Proton Center in Irving, Texas, which was about 40 minutes. We were before traffic, so it wasn't too hard. But every morning, we would leave early so that we could stop at the donut shop on the way, grab whatever donut Sam wanted for that day. Hey guys. And he couldn't eat it because every single day for 4 weeks in a row, Sam had to be completely sedated, put all the way under for his proton therapy treatment. So that he wouldn't, that was the only way to ensure that a 3-year-old wouldn't move. Sedation can be like a scary thing. I don't know how many of you guys have been through that, but I remember one time when Maud was having her appendix taken out, I was nervous about her being sedated and having to be put all the way under. Sam went through that 20 times every single day, each time we did proton therapy, and a bunch of other times every time he needed an MRI, etc. I promise I'm getting to the funny story. Okay, so we'd stop at the donut store. He couldn't eat it because he had to be sedated. We'd get out there, we'd sit for a minute, usually play some games on the phone. Everybody at the Proton Center knew to check in on Sam's dragons that he was raising on his iPad and see how they were doing. And after he woke up, he'd take a little while to come out of sedation, and Sam was a complete bear every time he came out of sedation, just pissed off and angry. And I don't blame him. It made him feel terrible. But he would start to come to, and I would whisk him on out of there. And as soon as we were in the car, I want my donut. And there was this one time, somewhere right in the middle of all this, we had the donut. I got him out there. I put him in the car seat, and I grabbed the donut out of the bag, and I'm handing him the donut with this hand and trying to look at something on the floor in the other. And all of a sudden, I feel him grab my hand with a donut in it and start to sink his teeth into my hand. He was still so out of it. He thought he had the donut in his hand, and he was about to take a bite out of me. But I got it whipped back fast enough, and he did not eat me. I was thinking about these, and I've got them kind of in chronological order in my head about how old he was when these things happened, these different stories. And one of my very favorites comes from, it was after his first round of chemotherapy. He handled that chemotherapy really well. And then we went home, and we were home for a couple of days, and he spiked a fever because his counts were low. The chemotherapy knocks out lots of things in your body, and one of them is your body's ability to fight infection. So he spikes a fever, and we take him. Anytime he spiked a fever throughout this whole thing, we immediately went to the 6th floor, to the cancer ward, because he was in their care. So we went to the cancer ward, and he had to get several transfusions of blood over a few days because his counts were all low, including like his hemoglobin counts, which is, if I remember, again, this is science, so if I get it wrong, I'm sorry. But the hemoglobin was responsible for like carrying the energy through his body, right? Simple layman's terms. Well, his hemoglobin counts were really low. So he gets these transfusions, but in between, he's still being Sam. Like, he's still bouncing around and playing. And I remember at one point, he's got, all of his bags hanging from the IV stand. He's been hooked up for a couple days, and he's got a red blood cell bag hanging up there. And he's like, I want to go in the hallway. So we go out in the hallway, which we would go for walks sometimes. And we're out in the hallway, and I'm pushing the pole behind him, and he is stomping like a dinosaur. He's a T-Rex stomping through the hallways, and everybody's chuckling and laughing. And the charge nurse at the time, Cammie is a dear friend of ours now, comes around the corner, and I swear to God, she did a double take. She saw Sam, she looked away, and she kind of comes over to me while he's dinosauring over here, and she kind of gives me a side whisper and says, I've seen his counts. He shouldn't have energy to be out of bed, let alone doing this. And I just looked at her, because this was one of Cammie and I's first interactions. I looked at her and I said, meet Sam. Because that's kind of how Sam rolled. He was never one to let much of anything slow him down, which, I think that was a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because anytime you saw something that did slow him down, and those times were there, you knew how bad it had to be. Normal stuff, and by normal stuff, I mean chemo rounds and headaches, and he would kind of bounce through those and bounce back very quickly. So a little further down the line, this is a couple weeks after his first chemo round, and you all know a lot of chemotherapy drugs cause hair loss, right? So after Sam's first round of chemo, he lost his hair between the first and second rounds, and we had talked about it. With Sam, we always tried to talk to him about what was going on, what was coming, so that there weren't surprises, right? now I'm thinking about how we kind of balanced that with not telling him things until we needed to, so he didn't have to live in fear of what was coming either. It was a little bit of both. But we had talked to him about that, you know, the chemo was going to happen, and then he might lose his hair, and that it's okay for him to do that. Like, don't worry about it. Amen. And he got nervous about losing his hair, and so I told him, listen, if you start to lose your hair, I'll shave mine too, and we'll be bald together. It'll be fine. It'll be awesome. So fast forward a couple weeks later, his hair is like thinning more and more every day. We had some amazing neighbors at the time. It was a different house than where we live now. On the one side, I had a neighbor who brewed his own beer, and he was actually good at it, like really good at it. Shout out to Ned. And Ned would just bring over growlers and leave them on the front porch, and I would leave the empty growlers outside. It was like he was a milkman for beer. It was wonderful. Thank you, Ned. On the other side, we had the Estes family, who had a nice house and they had a pool in the back. They were out of town in California for almost that whole summer. And they said to us, hey, y'all use the pool while we're gone. It's yours. Treat it like your own. And so we did. So we were in the pool all the time that summer. There was like a beaten path in the grass out our front door and over to their side gate. But we got him out of the pool one day, and I toweled him off, and in the towel is like almost all the hair. It's so thin now that there's no point in keeping it. So we said, okay, today's the day, Sam. Let's shave your head. And he looked at me and he goes, you said you'd go too. And he was right. I had. But Sam never forgot anything. Like, he, and those of you who know me know that I forget a lot of things. And so he was always keeping me in check on things that I failed to remember. He always had it locked up right in there. And so he did. He remembered. And so we shaved my head first. I let him do it. There's a video on our Facebook group, the Super Sam Facebook group. If y'all aren't members of that, go and take a look. We had to make it private because we had some people who actually got into that group and weren't using it for the right purposes, unfortunately. But if you want to see Sam's story, it's all there from the very beginning with pictures and videos and everything. You can go. You just have to answer some application questions so we know that you're a real person. So feel free to take a look. Just look for Super Sam, or hit me if you can't find it. I'll get you there. But we have videos on there of him and his sister shaving my head, and then we did his, and then I have my very favorite picture of all of them, which is I'm holding Sam and hugging him, and he's looking back over my shoulder, and the camera's behind me, so all you see is the back of my bald, luckily mostly round head, and Sam, and he's just grinning, just smiling. Kid just had to shave his head because the chemo drugs took all his hair, and he's smiling. He was smiling. If there's anybody who didn't see yesterday's video, I'm going to tell this story again. I know I told it yesterday. A little while later, when Sam relapsed and we had to go through stronger chemo medicine, he had grown his hair back in between, and his hair was falling out again. We came to the same point. It was like, okay, buddy, it's time to shave it. So he said, okay, Dad, you go first. And so I did. I sat down. I let him and his sister shave my head again. And I said, okay, buddy, your turn. Sit in the chair. He looks at me dead in the eye and he says, I changed my mind. And so I was bald for a few days before he lost all of his anyway. Yeah, tricky boy. Tricky. Another funny Sam story. So I remember one day I can't remember how I got the information, but there was a blood drive going on, and Sam had needed several transfusions. And so I said, okay, let's go give some blood. So I went to the blood drive. I ran into my really good friend, Chuck Kobdish there. Chuck, who has given his body's weight in blood like 1,000 times over. I have found since then, it's not odd to run into Chuck at a blood drive because he goes to all of them. But I ran into Chuck, and I got my blood done, and I came home. And Sam, I think he was still 3 at the time, maybe 4. He looked at you get the neon green like bandage around the cotton on your arm, and he looked at that and he said, what is that you have on your arm? And I said, well, buddy, you know how you've needed a lot of blood over the last couple months when we have to hang the bag. He said, yeah, I know that. I said, well, today I went and I gave some of my blood just in case you need some, because Sam and I were a match. It wasn't a direct gift to him. It was for whoever. But try explaining it to a 3-year-old. So I said, hey, I went and I put some blood in a bag in case you need some later. And he thought about it for a minute, and he looked around and he goes, can I see it? And when I told him that I didn't bring the bag of blood home with me, he was really upset. He was just disappointed that I would make a bag of blood and just leave it behind for anybody to find. A few years after that, or not few years, a few months probably, this was when we were getting ready to go into Cooks, and he was getting ready to have an apheresis catheter put into his neck. It was a catheter that they could use to pull blood out, take the stem cells from the blood, and then put the blood back. We called it his soda straw. He's sitting there, he's getting ready to go into surgery, and he did pretty well when it was time to go back for anesthesia, and every once in a while he'd get nervous and they would give him a drug called Versed. And Sam on Versed is like me after one too many beers. He gets just, silly and funny, and he just is like watching a drunk 4-year-old. And he would say the funny things, and like his dad, he had a little like bravado. So he's sitting there. Sam and I had played, when you have a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, he was all those ages through this, who can't go to school, and you work from home, you find ways to entertain. One of the things that Sam and I did, we played this game. It's a dinosaur game is what we called it, but it's called Ark. And Ark's pretty cool because you build a base and it's full of dinosaurs, and you can tame the dinosaurs to do jobs for you. And it had, I don't even know how many different species of dinosaurs. Some of them they even made up, but a lot of them. And each one could be tamed to do like a specific job. Well, my son at 4 years old knew more dinosaur names and could identify them on sight than anybody I've ever seen, kid, adult, or anybody. So here we are on Versed, and he's talking to the anesthesiologist who had just squeezed the plunger, which reminds me of another funny anesthesia story I'll tell in a minute. And they're talking about Sam. They're talking to Sam about Sam. They're like, "You're so strong, and I bet you're so fast too." And he looks at them and he goes, "I'm faster than a Gallimimus." A Gallimimus in the game is a fast ostrich-looking dinosaur. And the anesthesiologist looks at me, and he looks at Sam and he goes, "What's a Gallimimus?" And so Sam says, "It's a dinosaur." And the anesthesiologist says, "You know a lot about dinosaurs?" Sam's like, "Yeah, I know all of them." He goes, "I think you made that one up. I don't think that's a real dinosaur." Sam looks at this anesthesiologist, puts his hand out, and says, "Give me your phone." So the guy gives Sam his phone. Sam hands the phone to me and says, "Show him Gallimimus." So I had to Google up Gallimimus and show the guy a picture that it was actually a thing. And all of the nurses thought that was hilarious, that the 3 or 4, I think 4-year-old had something that the anesthesiologist doc didn't know. There are things I've learned. There are things anesthesiologist docs don't know. Don't tell them I said so. The other funny story about anesthesia is what would happen with Sam. Sam was tough, like across the board tough. And so the same thing happened every time they tried to put Sam down. They used a lot of, what was the white stuff? Same stuff Michael Jackson used, propofol. Used a lot of propofol to get him under, especially when he was younger and didn't want to do the mask. He didn't like the mask to knock him out early on. Later he got better at that. But so they'd have the little plunger of propofol, and every single time when we had a new anesthesiologist, this is exactly what happened. Like hands down every time. They push a little bit, give him the dose they thought that it needed to knock him out, And he would go, and they would go, huh, push a little more. Sam goes, and they would go, huh, and push a little more. And finally he would start to drift off, but then he would like fight it and try to keep his head up, and they would just shake their head and be like, man, and hit him with the rest of it. And down he would go. But every single time they were like, he fights it hard. I'm like, he doesn't fight it, it just doesn't work. It's hard to slow the kid down. I'm coming up to the end of my walk here, and so I got one more. Those of you who met Sam and kind of hung out with him know he was my rule following kid, right? I have 3 kids, they're all very different. Sam was a rule following kid. He hated breaking the rules, and when he got old enough to read, that slowed us down a lot. I remember one time when we moved out of the house that I mentioned before, they built a bigger house on top of it, and so my dad was in town. Dad and I went to the construction site to check it out, and the house was 2/3 built, so we were taking a tour, and Sam wouldn't go in. He refused. So we finally cajoled him into the house, and he spent the entire time going, the police are gonna come. They're gonna get us. We gotta get out of here. We shouldn't be here. Please, please. And he wouldn't come upstairs, wouldn't do any of it. Always wanted to follow the rules. We were in New York City, and we were at an event put on by a country club, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, for the kids at the Ronald McDonald House. And it was also a yacht club. And we went out there, and having grown up on the coast, I like boats. So I wanted to go down to the dock and look at the boats. And we get down there, we're strolling along, and there's a big sign on the thing that says members only. And in my head, I'm like, oh God, here we go. And man, he dug his heels in when he read that sign. And I knew he had read it. I knew exactly when. And he refused to go. He said, I will not go. And so I did not get to look at the boats, except from the shore. That was Sam. You know, he knew the rules and he would follow them. That's our 3/4 of a mile today, guys. Remember why we're doing this. It's Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month. We're trying to raise funds and awareness. The organization that we're supporting right now is Alex's Lemonade Stand. Amazing organization that does research grants and some other cool things that we're going to talk about. We'll spend one walk talking about nothing but Alex's Lemonade Stand, and then we're going to talk about some other organizations that are also great. But they do research grants. I got too close to the house, so we're switching back and forth between Wi-Fi and stuff. I'm sorry. But they also support the frontline families that are working on fighting cancer, right? They support the siblings and everything. So there's a link at the top of the description for this on how to get there. I'm walking every day. We're done for today. We're 10% of the way done. Only 27 more of these to do, guys. I really appreciate it. We saw more people watch this yesterday than watched it the first day. Last I looked, it was over 3,000, so thank you so much. It was shared more than the first one was. That's exactly what I asked you guys to do, so please do that. I love the reactions. I love the comments. It really means a lot to us, but it takes 1 or 2 more clicks to share it and move it through, right? So if you can, just that one little thing, just share it. Just share it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow, okay?